Welcome all. This is a joint webinar by us from Ellie and the Datavault Builder team. My name is Juha Korpela. I'm the Chief Product Officer of Ellie Technologies. And Peter is here from Datavault Builder. And let's go into introductions shortly, but let me first show you the, we have the slide up already. Good. So establishing GDPR compliance for your enterprise data is today's topic. Here's some basic info on us. My job is basically to do running product development at Ellie, and you can see contact details there. Peter, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me and us here. My name is Peter Belles. I'm a senior consultant at 2150 Datavault Builder AG in the meantime. And my task is to do pre and post sales. I'm working with implementation partners and potential clients to enable them to use the Datavault Builder. And part of my role is to do introductions like today, showing new ideas, showing new technology that we are implementing to potential clients.
Excellent. And our agenda today is such that in the first part, I will be doing a brief introduction on what Ellie is and how Ellie helps you to achieve this GDPR compliance issue. We will look at a kind of general approach to this topic first, and then I'll show you an example model that we are using for this webinar, in which we kind of point out the interesting and important parts of the data modeling process that need to be taken into account when figuring out this GDPR thing. And from there on, I will give the stage to Peter, who will lead you through on how to use that information in your own projects involving Datavault. So without further ado, let's begin with a kind of the basics. I swear I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but just some basics to get us on the starting ground here. Ellie's approach is to achieve this kind of compliance and understanding of your data products via the method of data modeling. And for us, data models are things that enable us to communicate better between the business and the IT people, thus kind of bringing this collaborative aspect to all data work. And our approach to data modeling is perhaps slightly different from many others. We emphasize kind of fast and easy business-driven results where you can see what the things are actually about, what reality looks like first, and from there on you derive your kind of technical outcomes. So Ellie as a tool is made to support this. It's fast and easy. It's completely cloud-based, no installations, nothing runs on your browsers, you will soon see. And the core idea of Ellie is practically so that you use these different levels of data models to achieve these benefits. The first thing for us, and the important thing today especially, is going to be conceptual data modeling. So figuring out the business. The second level of data models that Ellie has is logical data modeling, where you can kind of drive those models towards your kind of technical implementation, the structures that you need for a specific use case. The idea behind Ellie's conceptual models is that they are closely interlinked with the glossary. So the glossary in Ellie, and we'll go through this in a little bit more detail soon, is something that unifies your terminology and ties all the models together by basically giving you a list of core business concepts. And these core business concepts have metadata about them, which we're going to be using today in our GDPR example. The other thing is that we want Ellie to be something that many people can use with different sorts of backgrounds. So it's not just something that your data architects could be doing, alone on their laptop somewhere, but we would like the act of data modeling to be something that is collaborative by nature. And the idea is that this has to be something that you can share. So For example, you can easily just, invite your whole organization to Ellie users and share the models as direct links. That way, the model kind of becomes a kind of focal point of communication around the data issue, whatever that might be, or the kind of data product that you're building. We like to talk about data product design in that sense, and we'll share a few words about that also today. Integrations are important because, of course, we want the data models to be utilized. If you create such a beautiful blueprint, it has to be actually used somewhere to be useful. And what you're going to see today has to do with that. So Ellie has there are file-based exports and so on, and there are API interfaces which Datavault Builder, for example, is able to use. That means that the model from Ellie is practically kind of directly exported into a tool like Datavault Builder, which is able to utilize that structure and that metadata to generate all kinds of things, as we will see. Just as in a few words, couple of kind of use cases for this. Obviously, the first use case is practically what we're doing today, and this has to do with designing data platforms. And we like to call this kind of a business-driven data platform development pipeline, where the idea is that Ellie captures the actual business need, the reality of what exists in the business, what are the important things, what are the structures, which are then driven forward into these technical data tools such as Datavault Builder, which are able to then build those technical structures, database solutions, or whatnot, whatever your platform might be, that contain all that data in a structure that is understandable to the business. The core idea is that by building all of this from a business perspective first, you end up with a data solution that is far more easier to understand, and thus something that is far more actionable than perhaps a kind of more source-driven approach. This is, of course, something that those of you familiar with Datavault will immediately recognize. This is how Datavault needs to be done by starting from the actual business concepts, the taxonomy and the ontology of the actual organization. Another thing that we are seeing, and this is not something that we're going to be talking much about today, but something to keep in mind, is that it's not just about data vaults and data platforms. We're also seeing this need to understand these business concepts and structures in master data management initiatives. So if you aim to build something like customer master data management, the process or the system, you really need to understand better what is a customer and how that is different from a prospect or a lead or something like that. And data models can be used as a kind of vehicle of understanding in also these kinds of projects. And we do see this at many clients that we have, that this is actually quite important to get right in the first place. Another interesting use case, which now has to do somewhat with our example today, is data governance. So the kind of technically driven data governance initiative usually focuses on gathering like technical metadata. What are your systems, your databases, your tables, and so on, and then trying to apply rules and policies and ownership on top of that. What we are seeing in many clients that we talk with is that this level of metadata on the highly technical level is difficult to understand for the people who actually should understand it, the people who make those rules and policies, the people who should be those data owners. Usually this is the business experts, to a degree at least. And if you are able to kind of abstract away some of the technical complexity and define your data assets on a higher level, it's far easier for everyone involved to figure out what the rules and policies should be. As we will see a bit later today, this is something that you can do kind of at the very early stage of design, rather than going into, lots of code and platforms and databases and so on, and then trying to figure out which column is what and what do you have to do with it. It's far easier when you have the higher level design at first. You can discuss with your business experts, figure out what is this data actually about? What data is personal information that we should actually care about in terms of GDPR? So the setup of such a data governance approach is far easier to do on this level. And this is what we see at quite a few clients. One thing I have to mention here is of course, to drop a kind of hot hype term, but as data mesh thinking is going forward and organizations are figuring out kind of product thinking relating to data, figuring out how these different sorts of data products and domains and so on, how they relate to each other and how they are scoped so that you can build these kind of decoupled data products. One thing to understand there is that the data content needs to be understandable also across domains. Even though the data products themselves in a mesh-like decentralized setup might be kind of independently developed, you need to have this understanding of what the data content is so that you are able to mix and match the data from different sorts of products and domain areas. So we're seeing that in these cases, it's highly valuable to be able to describe the data content, again, at a higher level of abstraction with this kind of a business glossary behind it that tells you that, oh, these are the data products we have, and those three have to do with customers, and that one has to do with leads, and these are not the same things. So enabling such communication, enabling these data products to be browsed and discovered in business terms is highly important. So those are some use cases where we are seeing this kind of business-focused data modeling, data product design being used. The approach we take today is something that we're kind of thinking in terms of compliant design. So how do we figure out in the early stages what part of the data product is kind of critical in the sense of GDPR? And if we think of a kind of generalized data modeling process, it could also be called just a design process, really. The idea is that when we are doing data vault, when we are doing actually anything, we should always start with the actual business need and the kind of real life entities that exist in the real life business. So the idea is that from the business need, we identify the slice of reality that we want to model, and we create the conceptual data model. We create the glossary entries, the business terms, the core concepts, and their definitions based on that. And this is a stage where we are practically not even thinking about technology, not even thinking about technological solutions or specific systems or tools. We are thinking about what is the data that I actually need? What is it about? What rules and policies are involved there? And the idea is that as these models are created in Ellie, they can be easily reused in different sorts of projects. And with a tool like Datavault Builder, you can kind of grab a model from Ellie and then use that as your blueprint directly. So to create a kind of compliant by design data platform solution. The cool thing here, however, is that it's always possible to reuse these models because they describe your business reality. It's always possible to reuse these models for all kinds of projects and purposes, even though the original reason might have been something like data platform development. So in a nutshell, what you have in Ellie, as you will soon see, you have conceptual models which describe this business reality as it is, which are kind of simple but powerful. Where all the entities come from the kind of centralized repository of terms, the glossary. And then for kind of more detailed use case specific needs, you have the logical models which allow you to practically design a specific implementation structure, which might be, related to data vault, it might be a star schema, whatever, but that's usually something that you design on a per need basis. now in today's example, we're just going to be using the conceptual models to drive the work in Datavault Builder, but the logical models would be equally possible as kind of a source of generating some of that more technical solution stuff. What the glossary does is it gives us this list of unique entities which are reused across different models, and it allows us to define metadata. This metadata contains information like description, of course, what is a product, what is a customer, what's an employee, which, by the way, might be a very, very difficult thing to agree on unless you have this kind of visual model and the supporting glossary behind it. It also allows you to define attribute level metadata already at this kind of conceptual stage, early stages of the design. So we could say that, okay, for a product, we always know the product code, we know the product name and type and model and so on and so forth, even without thinking about the systems. These entities are then reused in Ellie across different models, and we're able to track your usage of these entities in such a way that you can see that the product entity is being used in these different models, and this is how it links to other entities across all the kind of landscape that you're building there. How that works with confidential and kind of person-related information then is that when you define these real-life core business concepts, it's fairly simple, usually, to identify that, hey, if I have an entity called patient, if I have an entity called employee, or something, an event relating to their, comings and goings, who is moving where at what time, this is confidential information. This is something that relates to the identifiable person, and this is something that has to be handled in a proper compliant manner. So while we are modeling this data need, at that stage already we identify these kind of important entities, and we can start adding metadata about it into Ellie at that stage already. So at this point, the discussion around these topics is still quite simple because it's kind of not complicated by technical details. We don't have to talk about satellites and hubs and whatnot, or source system structures. We can handle that in the separate stage after this. But the idea is that we keep the communication kind of clear and understandable, and achieve this kind of collaboration over this topic, which means that most likely we have been identifying the correct things and haven't missed anything critical here. You can see here in a picture that we have a custom metadata attribute, for example, here called sensitivity. I'll show you how that works in a moment. But this is the sort of stuff that Datavault Builder then utilizes. So what happens there compared to the process diagram that I showed you before is that within that conceptual modeling and glossary definition stage, we identify the core business entities, we identify which of them might be confidential, or even if it's not confidential, it's just something that is related to persons and thus kind of identifiable information, personal data. We can list the attributes kind of on a conceptual level, saying that, well, a person's name is always personal data, regardless of in which systems it exists. And we can use this notation to mark that, hey, these attributes are personal data, these are PII, these are confidential, or even on an entity level, before we go into the actual implementation. So it's kind of a design step ensuring that the compliance needs are met as early as possible. So that's the slide deck there. And what I'm going to do now is to show you an example of how that kind of works in real life. So we have an example we created with Peter, which has to do with patients in the hospital. So let me just bring that up. This is my personal Ellie, my playground here. And you can see that Ellie is a very simple tool. I'm not going to go over all the functionalities here, but we have a model list and we have the glossary here. You can see that my personal playground has all sorts of weird examples here. But as we create a new model, we are going to call that our healthcare example number 2. and we face an empty canvas, we can start working via the glossary by thinking about our actual use case, the scope of the data product we want to build. And this was about patients in a hospital. So we're interested in things like treatments given to the patients, the diagnoses that have been given to the patients, and so on and so forth, perhaps the costs of treating people in specific locations and so on. So the process is to practically just identify what are the interesting entities. For example, here a patient is one, and I have created this already in my glossary. So I can search for entities here, easily click and drag. Let's zoom in a little bit. Click and drag stuff here, saying that, okay, well, I'm interested in patients. I'm interested in diagnosis. So I'm picking entities from my glossary, and these are something that I have defined earlier as a health-related issue identified in a patient, etc., etc. But of course, I could also, during this modeling process, figure out with the business experts, what does a diagnosis actually mean? Now, for our purposes here, I have predefined these, so you don't have to wait as I try to write more text. But if we take a very simple example here, we could say that there's an employee, there's a patient, there's diagnosis, and a diagnosis classification. And the process usually goes in such a way that we figure out that, well, you know, what's the relationship between a patient and a diagnosis? Well, the patient obviously has a diagnosis, so we can write here a description that this is the nature of the relation. A single patient could have multiple diagnoses. And then we can say that, well, the diagnosis has been given by an employee, a doctor, or whoever has the power in our healthcare organization. So we can define the relationships between an employee and diagnosis as such. And perhaps we have a classifying data set here, which involves the official diagnosis classification. So we can mark that down here as well. So what kind of describing the world as it is, but from the viewpoint of data entities, patients, employees, diagnosis, classifications. Perhaps we could add a treatment period here. I'm not going to create all of this model here live, but just to give you an idea of how this works, we go on, we discuss with the data experts, the business experts, and everyone who knows something about these things. And we can say that, let's actually make this so that this is in a service location here. So we're saying that the patient is undergoing a treatment period in a specific location of our hospital and so on and so forth, and perhaps given treatments during that period. And all of this is kind of common sense stuff. There's no magic to this. The idea is simply that we need to define what the reality looks like before we go into developing our actual models. Developing our actual data solutions. So now my example here called, what was this called again? My healthcare example here. This is the kind of complete model. So the idea is that we have now defined a slice of reality, the data structure, the actual business entities which form the basis of the data vault design. We have defined that there is a an entity called treatment period. There's a description for that. And now we're getting to the point of compliance. So we look at the data here, we look at the model, we figure out, okay, you know, what information here might be personal data, which might be something that we need to take care of in terms of GDPR. So obviously we have data about patients, obviously we have data about employees. And we're using these as examples. Now, of course, in real life, diagnoses and treatments and whatnot would be, of course, highly personal as well. But let's go via the simple route here. So I have defined the patient as a person who receives treatments in our hospital, and I have defined a bunch of attributes for them. And now these are attributes not necessarily that would not necessarily exist in a single system. This could be spread around multiple different systems. Here we have kind of simplified it and made it so that everything's kind of coming from a single place. But the cool thing here is that as we add attributes, we can have kind of attribute level metadata, and these are fully customizable in Ellie. So we have defined that there's a sensitivity metadata field for each and every attribute, which defines these attributes as personally identifiable information, or something which is even more kind of personal, and then kind of general information, which is not that critical. We have defined attribute owners. So if there is a specific person or a role or a department that owns the data relating to this, we can mark it down. Here we have listed Peter as the owner of the first 3 attributes and the care department as the owner of the rest. And we can define source systems and columns and so on and so forth. We have also, importantly, for the Datavault development project here, defined the business key. So the patient ID works as a business key here. And the same has been done for the employee data. So you can see from here that we have definition for the employee and we have attributes for the employee with the exact same setup. So we have the sensitivity level on the attribute level, we have the source systems, we have the owners, we have the business keys defined, everything on the conceptual level with links to the source systems where we can eventually then find this data. And what this gives us is basically the blueprint of how the data vault should be built. This just now needs to be converted into hubs and links and satellites and so on and so forth, with the idea that this PII data is handled with specific care. So what happens after that is that this model can be exported from Ellie into tools like Datavault Builder. There are many ways of doing it. There are file-based exports and so on. But what Peter will be using there is the Ellie model export API, which allows you to grab a single JSON file containing all of the information from the model and all of the metadata from these entities in a single file, calling practically the API with the model ID that you can see here on the top left corner. And that's how we get from Ellie to Datavault Builder. I think at this point, Peter, you could take over and show what happens next.
You need to unshare your screen and I will continue. Thank you.
There we go.
So, thank you a lot, Juha. And
No,
the very nice thing is why we like to work together with Ellie, because we agreed that we should start with business modeling. The business models are much more stable than technical models. And that's something that we always preach as well to our potential clients, to say, please think about what you're doing, what your business processes are, what your core business concepts are. And this is as well what we work in the Datavault Builder. What is the Datavault Builder? The Datavault Builder is a model-driven automation tool. It means that we recommend always to start with a data model. It can be created within Datavault Builder, but in an enterprise sizing, it could be very beneficial using Ellie, because Ellie is much more flexible, multi-group able, and everything that allows you to work in bigger corporations. In the Datavault Builder, you could as well start data-driven, but it's just not the recommended way. We support both because in certain situations it's necessary if you don't know about the data model and you need to just start as a second best solution based on the data. The target of this is by creating a simple model and translating this kind of models into working code in real time, so that it makes your data warehouse very, very agile. It makes it ready for self-service, like creating new interfaces, dragging in columns, renaming them can be done as well by less technical people. And it saves you a lot of time, costs, and it's reducing your project risk. If you want to read a little bit more comparison to other tools in this kind of area, please contact us and we can send you out the full BARC report from this year that compares us in many, many categories to other tools. And it shows that our clients are very, very happy, are the happiest on the market. According to BARC, we have a high recommendation rate as well based on the very high support quality. And what are we doing different than other tools? The first thing is we have as well in the tool a very simple interface that you can use as well to talk to business users. It's the same idea like in Ellie. So if you have any questions as well, if you're working on technical level, you still can sit together with your business users, talk about it, make corrections, and show them in real time the changes, because the Datavault Builder is translating this kind of models in real time into working code. This means database objects, loads, everything that you need that you don't want to take care of manually. So imagine that you have like a PowerPoint slide of what you want to achieve, you press the button and you have the finished product. That's what the Datavault Builder does. And it doesn't just do this model to code conversion, it takes care of everything else that is in there. It's about the development process, it's about setting up different environments, syncing them, making it ITIL compliant, about operations, about data profiling, about documentation, data lineage, and much, much more. And this is what we offer. So instead of having many different tools to achieve this kind of data integration work that we are doing and data cleansing and everything that needs to be done, you have one single platform that you can use to solve all of your integration needs. This means it starts with infrastructure setup. We are delivering the software, so-called Docker containers that you can start by configuration. We're converting models into code, but it's two-way. So if you changed some tables or views on the database, it will update the model as well. And we are updating your physical model on the database automatically. So we send you update scripts, we send you new patterns and take care to maintain your implementation over a long time. As well, what is in there, automated testing. So you can completely just using REST API set up a new environment, install your models you want to test, run them, get the result all through REST APIs. Deployment is built in. So if you have like your development test and production machine, you can create all the deployment scripts automatically by comparing them. Or if you are in a more mature organization, you can use as well the Git flow process. This means you can use branching and merging of data models to achieve as well at the end CI/CD if you want. There is everything there. You choose what you already need in the beginning and what you maybe want to use later. You can automate your deployment using REST APIs. Operations is built in, so there is a tool that creates automatically your master jobs. You can schedule them within the tool, but you can as well use external schedulers like UC4, Control M, whatever you're using, or Airflow to trigger this kind of jobs. Again, there are REST APIs for that. And we can show you as well patterns for high availability. What I don't have on this slide are things like data profiling. What I can show here in the demo, it's not what we don't have on here is documentation and data lineage, which are created automatically in the background. Where does the Datavault Builder run? It's you choose. You can start on-prem today. You can move to the cloud into your private cloud later, and as well choose a hosted solution provided by one of our implementation partners, and you can switch at any point in time. And we think that's very, very important because you don't know what happens in 5 and in 10 years. And we want to give you the security or to be sure that whatever happens, if maybe pricing changes of any cloud platform, that you have the possibility to move between them and run your data implementation integration platform wherever you want to do that. So what do we cover? The first thing is we read data directly from your source systems into an integration platform, which is running on top of a database. We create interfaces, and these interfaces are exposed to your reporting layer. So we're not a reporting tool and we are not a source system, but anything in between. And the supported databases include all the SQL Server variants on-prem and in the cloud, Snowflake, Exasol, Oracle, Postgres, and from next year on as well, BigQuery. And where comes Ellie into the game? Ellie is providing us already all the model information, all this information that you could capture in the tool is provided by Ellie, by this collaborative approach, and we can generate this kind of information. But if we go more into detail and we look a little bit at the technical point of view, where we have the source system, the staging layer, the core layer where data is persisted, the interface layer where all the outputs are created, and then the reports that can be filled. We see from Ellie, we can read not only the model, but by providing column level metadata as well, create the loads from the staging area into the core like filling the so-called hubs by loading the business key, loading satellites, split by privacy settings, and we can create as well interfaces because we know based on certain rules that we can define in our synchronization script that certain information can be directly be output, some other information need to be probably approved, there need to be more permissions set that you can output this data and you can access the data directly if it's not sensitive. And this is what I will show, that based on this information that we have received, we can create this full pipeline. Additionally, what I'm not showing and what I haven't implemented yet, because I just took now a few hours to prepare this webinar, is you could control based on the information we're receiving from Ellie as well, stuff like dynamic data masking in Snowflake. It's really up to you what you want to control, because if you have the metadata, you can control what on a legal basis you want to control with it. And the nice thing is, if we implement it with the Datavault Builder, we have as well the GDPR metadata ready, and we can query it and we can see it, and we know exactly what is implemented because it's directly connected to the implementation. So if we have audit, it's very, very simple to see how it runs, and I will show you as well a simple query at the end, how we can visualize that. Important for me is GDPR, it's not a technical problem. Yes, we need to have a technical solution to implement it, but it's about a business problem and a legal problem. So we need to capture all the requirements that we have somewhere, and then we can generate all the rest. And then we can define based on the legal requirements what will happen. And because we have APIs, we can really tailor this to your needs. It means you will need some configuration as well, but you can at the end achieve what you really want to do with it. And everything what I will show you now in demo has its own REST APIs, because the whole Datavault Builder architecture is based on three-tier architecture with a server, a front end, and a back end. So anything that you see can be even further automated, but what I'm showing here is already very, very automated already. Good. So let's see how this looks like. And I'm a little bit nervous today because I have never done this before. I have prepared this example today by starting today at 9 o'clock in the morning, and we will see what I achieved today. So I'm starting here with a completely new Datavault Builder environment. Staging layer is empty. Our core layer is empty. All the output layers, there's something stuck, but in fact, I have deleted everything. So if we reload the web page, we will see that there's nothing to be seen. The lineage is empty. Everything is fresh. So what do I start with? I first start with something not created by Ellie. I'm importing my source connections from a model that I have created manually. So select, I want to import a folder. I go to my Git repository, drag in my Git folder. It compares the data coming from Git. It tells me that 2 source systems need to be created, and 2 jobs will be automatically created as well. So let's import that. And we see we have here some source connections ready. 2 tables will be staged. The one you was talking about, patient and employee. Let's load the data. Let's have a look at it, how this data looks like. That should be okay. And as well, the patient is loaded. That's it. How many rows we have? 13,000 patients and 1,200 employees. No fears, that's generated data. That's not data we have taken somewhere away. Next level is that we now want to put in a model that was created with Ellie. And I have copied now this model into my account, and I have added here as well some more information. I did as well here directly my source column mapping in, so I can really generate everything, even the loads based on this metadata. So what is the next step? I will run now the API script, and that we have some output. I am doing this using a Python script, and it will first connect to the Ellie API, read the data, and I have visualized it just that you see something happening. Now it's read all the data. It's now deploying all these changes that it has seen from Ellie to the Datavault Builder. It gives us a little firework. And let's have a look on what happened. Everything that we had in the Ellie model is now here visible. I have prepared as well a short bookmark that we don't need to rearrange the stuff. So the same stuff that we have seen before in the Ellie format, now in the Datavault Builder visualization. And we have seen that the attributes that were defined in 3 different privacy classes were already split into so-called separate satellites. And this is the general recommendation from Datavault 2.0, that if you have different sensitivity of information, you can split it by satellite, you can grant different permission, you can apply different masking rules on top of it. And this already happened just by putting the attributes into different categories. And this here is now not only a model anymore, it's a real implementation. So I can click on any of these objects and start loading it. And hopefully a few seconds later, we can have a look at the loaded data. So it did everything that is necessary, connect the stage data to our core model. It created a load containing historization. It will track if there are any implicit deletes. It has added this kind of loads already into the corresponding master job. So we see already the staging job I did execute before, but the core loads were not executed yet. So let's do that. But it's one click. I could schedule the job. I could run it with an external API call. We do the same as well for the second source system. So you see already as well, the source system information was received from the native model. So while you are modeling with the business user, we can capture already all this information, and we can use that to generate the real implementation of top of it. So now what have we achieved? We have loaded the data into our data warehouse core. It's already in the integrated model. But what do we do now? And I have decided in my Python script that I want to create as well interfaces on top of it. So for every object that we have, it's creating now on every privacy class that I have rated according from publicly available to very, very sensitive, different interfaces. In the general interface, we see only the general available attributes. If we have a look at the PII interface, it's not only the PII data, but the PII data plus the general available information. And if you look into the PII plus one, we have all the attributes from all the classes. This is not something that's God-given. That's something that I have defined based on my use case I had in my mind, based on certain clients we worked with. And it could be different for your company, but that's exactly this kind of automation that you can do if you set up rules, if you mark the attributes correctly. And you can do rules like if there is no privacy class defined, you will not add them at all. And they will hang there until somebody cleans up the metadata. As well, on the output level, I have defined a rule that sensitive information will not be published automatically. Yes, as a developer, I can now preview it here. I can look at it because I haven't created any dynamic data masking, which I could have generated based on this information. And I see it, but only this level is already automatically published as well. This here is a rule that I made up, what happens automatically with the data. So let's have a look at the data viewer. Let's look at the patient. So we can here already maybe look at the country. That's the built-in data profiling tool. We can use this maybe as a bar chart. And let's put it this way. And I see here there is a null value in, which makes it very difficult to read everything. So let's take that one out. And now we have our first value distribution of our patients. And you already see probably by the distribution that we have a lot of patients from Afghanistan. This is most probably generated data and not a real hospital here in Switzerland. So what can we do further? We have now generated the output, but at the same time, all this metadata that was generated is attached directly to the object in the database. So give me just a second. And I switch to my database view. So the same information that we captured on the model level are pushed down to the database. So we see here as well the different attributes connected. And by having this in the database, we can make it accessible as well by other tools. We have special views on the database that we can use to present it to your reports, to your data management tools, and whatever. And I have prepared, based on this small report, I'm using here a tool called Visu, which is allowing you to ask questions about your data in clear English. So let's prepare that. So I could say, which kind of sensitivity is existing in our model. Show me all the PII attributes, or and this allows you, even then in bigger models, if you have this kind of questions about your real implementation, to answer your GDPR and questions very fast. We didn't look at a lot of stuff like data deletion and many other topics. And yes, I know in the answering questions section, there might be some other requirements that we could talk about, but this is just like a basic idea that we can go from a model into a real world implementation, which is production ready. I can now go and deploy this to my next environment. I can put it on production and run it, and it will work for the next weeks, for the next month, and the years to come. And it can be as well extended and agilely developed to become a bigger model. Good. So this is a little bit of short introduction of what you can do by being model driven, and then defining rules, how this affects the real implementation, and using an automation tool which knows how to take these requirements and translate it into working code in nearly real time. Good. So Juha is back.
Yep. Excellent. Thank you, Peter. Yeah, if there are any questions, I think this would be the time for that.
If you're using Zoom, there is a question and answer button to use. If you're one of the people who joined us through LinkedIn, honestly, I don't know how you ask your questions.
I think we can see it from here. Let's have a look. Well, there has been a question at least about recording this. I suppose, Peter, that is something that you have set up?
Yes, we will send the recording to all the people that joined afterwards, and we'll make it available to you.
That's excellent.
As well, there is a question, if what happens... One question is, what if I need to collect more different, more information than you have presented here? I think Juha, that's a question to you.
Right. So of course, that depends on what kind of information you need more about. What we showed here was a very simple example of basically having attribute level sensitivity marked down as such. And then Peter had a specific kind of template or kind of a script that utilized that data to split those satellites and so on and so forth. So the basic idea is the same for practically anything. So you could use Ellie to have metadata about the, for example, the update rate of those attributes or something like that. You could use that in Datavault Builder to split your satellites. All of that is possible via the pretty much the same method. The only difference is in the level of metadata and the details that you gather in Ellie and what you have set up in Datavault Builder to utilize that information. So practically the sky's the limit. The example here shown is a kind of practical setup of this one aspect of PII data on attribute level, but it could be anything else as well.
Yes, I can confirm always if I ask something, if we can add a field, it's just by configuration. And this kind of information like we created here is presented on the API as a JSON structure, so we can read it and we can then map it to Datavault Builder functionality. It always depends on what your requirements are, but it's very, very flexible what you can do.
There's another question from Andrew asking, would Ellie be introducing data stewardship capabilities within the tool? That's a good question. We actually just posted about our roadmap and our vision on our blog on ellie.ai, our website. And the idea is that, yes, eventually we do intend to kind of expand the metadata around these models to cover kind of related topics such as systems involved, the kind of roles and responsibilities around the data, perhaps business processes and so on. So these are kind of metadata items around these data models that we intend to expand on. When that happens, I can't say for sure, but it is certainly our intention.
Good. So there's one question about how do we capture change if we have different data sources? And this is very simple to answer because we are based on the Datavault standard for the core. We are not based on the Datavault standard for the output. Please don't confuse that. We're outputting dimensional models. We are outputting normal form models, flat tables, data products. But in the core, we are based on Datavault structures. And there we are capturing every single source into a so-called separate satellite. And this is what we need to change if the source changes. But certain changes are already captured by the tool. If we have like one column missing in the source system, that's fine. We will load the column automatically empty. If the field length extended from 20 to 30 characters, I don't know how many times I had this as a really stupid problem that you need to solve Friday evening, 11 o'clock in the evening, this captured automatically. If the data type changes and we can implicitly convert it into what we captured before, we do this automatically. But if this is not possible in that case, we would stop only this one single load, and then you would need to fix this one single load and change it. If there are new columns, that's very simple in Datavault. You could take the new columns, you decide if you create a new satellite, and in the output layer, you can join them or not join them. That's really completely flexible. So that's really covered in a very good way. There's one more question on support.
Yep.
Both tools are supported products, so it's not like that you get the software and you do it yourself. For Datavault Builder, we have different channels, like we have a support portal, we have knowledge base, we have email support. So that's everything there. Juha, as much as I know, it's the same on your side.
Exactly. Pretty much the same with us. We have a YouTube channel, we have a blog with all kinds of helpful hints and tips. We have our user guides and whatnot, and of course, support via email and whatnot. So that sort of stuff certainly exists. What we perhaps don't have yet is kind of a user peer-to-peer support group on Slack or something. Might be something to investigate at some point.
Okay, and there's one question: how complex can the business rules be to hide sensitive data? And the idea is that we are not putting, if I go back here to the tool, we have separate layers. One is for storage. So in the storage, we need to store it, and at least the tool needs to be able to access it. So you can't just mask it generally if you want to unmask it at some point, but you would need to do dynamic data masking. But you can already here in creating the interfaces, take out the columns that you don't want to expose to the next layer. So it makes it very simple in case it's on the column level. In case it's on the row by row level, then it's different. But that would be a specific topic we need to discuss, because then you need to add marking of the rows. And yes, then you need to apply different permissions on database level or the reporting layer to filter them. But that's classical row level security issue that the database and your reporting tool can solve, but we can show you how, but it will be too complex to answer this like in 1 minute.
Yeah, I suppose eventually, as everything can be configured, it could be as complex as you want it to be. Right.
Good.
Seems that we have answered the open questions so far. If you still have something, there's still a little bit of time. We have 4 minutes runtime left, I think. If not, I'd like to thank you, Peter, first of all, and thank you everyone for listening in. And if you're interested in knowing more about Datavault Builder and Ellie, just contact us. ellie.ai is our website. You can get a free trial from there. Hit me up on LinkedIn. And I suppose the same for you, Peter.
Exactly. Thank you a lot for having the presentation with me here. Thank you for everybody that was participating, for your interest. Contact us on LinkedIn or through our company web pages. You can get free presentation, free demos. Just ask your questions. We're here to support you. That's our business. Thank you a lot and see you soon.
Excellent. Thank you all.
Oh, there's one last question. That's good. Is it possible to re-engineer existing Datavault implementation into Datavault Builder? Yes, we have 3 different ways to do that. There is a command line interface. If you have a small model and you have your metadata like in Excel, you could write this command line commands. We have the API to import it, or the deploy module, which takes a special human readable JSON description format for your model. So if you have the metadata of your existing implementation, we can import most of it. Let's be honest, with most of the clients that we did that, there are always like 5% of the objects which are not following the metadata rules that they set up. So it can be that there is some manual work, but usually most of the objects we can import automatically. But we are not managing then the existing Datavault implementation, but we are exporting the metadata from the existing implementation and take it into the Datavault Builder controlled realm.
Good.
So thank you and see you soon. Bye.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.